Omari Salisbury, thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the
You
invitation.
bet, anytime. So, as we record this conversation, 1 year to the day that George Floyd was murdered, how are your feelings today?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's taxing. Really kind of drained. Um, One, because a lot of interviews, but two, on the bigger picture, it really is a time for reflection. Not only as far as people talk about the country and the city and everything else, but even us here, at Converge before the murder of George Floyd. We were doing the morning update show. It was real community driven, community audience. We weren't worried about the rest of Seattle, let alone the rest of the country or the world. And with the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent events, it also transformed us as a platform. In covering it. And so today's been really a day of reflection, and also be able to kind of pull out the yardstick and see what has happened here, especially in Seattle and the state of Washington over the last 1 year.
Do
So
you,
what has happened in your to what you saw at the beginning to where we are now?
Well, I think that the people of Seattle and Martin Luther King County and the state of Washington, when we talk about politics and stuff, we'll start there first, is that Seattle is definitely a very unique place. I mean, and even going back to the Seattle protest, that you're not going to go to Atlanta or Houston or Dallas or a lot of places across America where you're going to get thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of white people to come out day after day, because and a lot of them, they couldn't tell you exactly what they wanted to happen, but they just knew that something had to change for black people. Clearly they wanted black people to stop dying at the hands of the police. But I mean, that's something automatically or initially that's very unique about Seattle. And you have to be realistic up there when we talk about the Western Barricade, especially the Seattle protest. That was that 1 week before the Seattle police decided to abandon their precinct. Thousands of people, white people mostly, came up there, got tear gas, pepper sprayed, rubber bullets, and everything, because they saw there was a greater cause, that they wanted their neighbors here, their black neighbors here in Seattle, for things to change for them. You don't find that in other cities. A lot of other cities, people, they were mad, clearly outraged about this crime against humanity with George Floyd, and then they went home. They're in the streets 2-3 days or whatever. Seattle's one of those unique places where people really feel like, one man, one woman, one person can make a difference. A lot of cities in America, people are like, man, ain't nothing going to change here. We might as well protest, put our sides, and then everything goes back to normal. Well, people found out quickly, Seattle ain't quite like that. And, when we look at it 12 months later, the power of the protest aligned with the activity of the advocates down in Olympia and other places. And, 1 year later, on the state level, Washington State leads the country now when you talk about issues of police reform and everything else. Governor Inslee signing in over a dozen bills around police accountability and everything else. And the state of Washington is way out there. As far as locally here, promise was made, and this 100 million from the mayor, the city council is doing what, it's a bit more convoluted. The yardsticks, the success measures in our local government here aren't quite as easily checked off as we would say down in Olympia. But I will say, on the flip side, though, is that what happened outside of the politics side is that we saw a city kind of get back in touch with its humanity, and we saw people like to always say the city that Seattle is, and a lot of times it's aspirational, and a lot of times, us in the black community especially, we don't see it. But Seattle's humanity was awoken around the murder of George Floyd, and people activated, and not just activate in the streets, as we would say, but whether it was public comment or writing their elected official or being involved in a process or just paying attention, which a lot of people here hadn't done. And that's something I'm hopeful that people's humanity here in this city will stay awoken, amongst all kinds of issues, not just police issues. And one other thing, is that what we see 1 year later is there's so many different groups that arose out of protests, especially that are providing mutual aid and service here, here in the community. And that's something that is going on to this day that didn't exist 1 year ago.
I have a question about all the white people showing up for the Black Lives Matter protest. One of the things that people miss is that inequality doesn't just affect brown people. It affects white people too, because a lot of the millennials that were out in the streets there, they don't have it that much better than anyone else. I mean, they talk about the techies and all this other stuff, but that doesn't trickle down. A lot of these people lost their jobs because they're in the service industry, and they're on the edge also. Do you think that contributed to them showing up?
I'll say this, and it's very clear. People always need to bifurcate these two things: the Western Barricade and the Chaz Chop. You know what I'm saying? Definitely, it was two different major events here in the city. The Western Barricade really going from June 1st to June 8th, and then consequently after June 8th, the chop all the way to July 1st. And I would say the people that came out there, when you look at it, actually, I got a few streams of the fate when especially when the police started using tear gas. I was just asking people, like, what do you do? What brought you out there? I wanted to be able to humanize the faces that are out there being impacted by this police violence. And we found it, especially early on there, you really had a real cross section. Capitol Hill's very close to Pill Hill, to the hospital. So you had first responders out there. You had doctors, you had nurses. You also had the Google and Facebooks, the tech bros. You had some people who were mad. You got to remember, man, the state of Washington's employment system had crashed. People couldn't get an employment check around COVID. So you had those people out there as well. I mean, mixed with a bunch of other people. But the majority of the people that I spoke to, at least early on, were people who were fully employed, who actually had good jobs, who weren't impacted so much by COVID, but who went out there to the streets. And I think that's something that's unique here in Seattle. Where there are other elements that are out there, yeah, it was a lot of people impacted by COVID. And a lot of people were impacted by COVID. Also, people were impacted by inequalities and social justice. So they're out there for two reasons. But you get what I'm saying? Yep. But I will throw this out here as well, as one of the big issues here in our country is that poor white people all tend to, a lot of times in a lot of places across the country, vote against their best interest because they want to make sure and keep black people down. You know what I'm saying? And so, poor white people, if you go out there into a lot of Appalachia right now, in the West Virginia and Kentucky, and you'd be like, man, how are you guys living like this? But politics around poor white people and keeping poor people actually in America working against each other's best interests is why a lot of these systems stay fragmented. You get what I'm saying?
So, Omari, you and your team were out in the streets every day during the time the protests were going on. And I know that this really affected you specifically, emotionally, physically, professionally. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. It's not always something I like to talk about, but it's you guys. It's an important platform. So it's probably important to share, is that we were community news based and community content, because Converge was all about getting out community content from community creatives and community storytelling. We weren't prepared or knew what was in store covering what ended up happening, being the Seattle protest. I covered May Day before, and you go down there and somehow the police maneuver everybody into South Seattle, through downtown, and it is kind of over with. And then the next day, it's May 2nd and it's whatever. And so even going downtown on May 30th, I actually covered May 29th, but May 29th, there was no police interaction. It was just, property destruction, which I covered there. But, and then May 30th, it was funky downtown. But if you come with this May Day kind of concept, like, okay, here's this one day and it's whatever. But like, wasn't prepared. The next day, the 31st, it was the most peaceful day I've ever seen. These guys, they wanted to kneel with everybody, take a knee, pray, everything. And I'm out there. There's a picture of me in the Seattle Times. Naomi Ishisaka took of me just out there with my red iPhone. There's not even a holder. You know what I'm saying? I'm just because it wasn't prepared to be like, yeah, we're gonna cover these protests, this and that, and because of that, and not going in and not realizing the level of police violence that would be encountered. I mean, when you see somebody like looting stores and this and that, you kind of in the back of your mind be like, man, the police are going to come with some kind of response on this, but when you've really got people actually peacefully gathering there's no way in the back of your mind that you have an expectation of what was unleashed there. And we, like I said, we weren't ready for it. You see me, I'm in the tape, I'm choking from tear gas, eyes watering, all kinds of, hits from the rubber bullets and everything else. And I remember after the first day, it was like, oh, okay, that's what it was no way they were going to do that 2 days in a row. And they did. And there was no way it was going to be 3 days in a row. You know what I'm saying? And they did. And by then, through mutual aid, somebody got some goggles, a glove, ultimately got a gas mask. But I think, so it's a few things that impacted me when you say emotionally. So I think like the Western Barricade was crazy because no one expected that level, like I said, of police violence and, and gassing a whole neighborhood to disperse some protesters, and so many different people impacted. And, I mean, and then even when you exit the Western Barricade and you go into the CHOP, there's a lot of trauma there, around the murder of Lorenzo Anderson Jr. and then Antonio Mays Jr. And I was there on I-5 on the freeway when that night when a car crashed into the protesters. And it was that's the night that Summer Taylor was hit and ultimately died in Diaz Love. And I mean, there were so many other things people got to remember, because people at the time, they were calling me this live streamer or whatever, but it's fine. But people got to remember, it's like so much stuff never made the stream because it just wasn't appropriate for it, because we was also like this hybrid kind of situation, because Converge, people just considered us an honest broker around so many things. So all these kinds of communications or disputes or whatever, we would just get called into the middle of. I mean, a lot of that stuff, of course, we never turned on the camera because it just wasn't the time or place for it. And so that, coupled with, like I said, the whole police thing, and then the sweeping of the CHOP, the people who were impacted and murdered up there, 24 hours of being there, and then hundreds of interviews, hundreds of people that I talked to there. I mean, that took an emotional toll. And then, in the protests as well, I said, a lot of us are injured, still living with injuries, still living with.
Do you feel like you walked away or still are dealing with some PTSD from all of this?
Like, of course. And going into this anniversary, it doesn't make it any better. As it's difficult because I don't know. My mom says, I don't know if there's such thing as having too much empathy, but I have a lot of emotion and feelings for I guess for myself, but I think that it's more around the people that I saw impacted, and because you got to think there's so many storylines, even if you're watching the stream, of people who we talk to every day for a month, you know what I'm saying, or talk to here and there, and it's all these things, and the cumulative effect of all of these people. I mean, it's definitely impacted. Getting back to your question is, okay, it's still rough and raw. And so we didn't have the benefit. Let me explain this to your viewers and to the listeners out there. A lot of people maybe covered what the Western Barricade and went home, or maybe even covered CHOP for 30 days. And then they went home, they went on, they did something else, covering something else and everything else. Converge, man, we promised people that we were going to see this process through. And so then it went from the Western Barricade to the CHOP being cleared, to all kinds of additional protests, including like July 25th, where the media was targeted, to different things. And then goes down to City Hall, and then are they going to defund by 50% or not? And the mayor vetoes, and then there's these promises, and then they got the $100 million, and now the mayor puts it out there. The city council takes the $100 million. There's the Black Brilliance Research Project of and their research and how that's going to go back. And Black Brilliance and King County Equity now split. And then Morales the other a few weeks ago said the mayor's declaring war on the Black community, and then all these other things. This is all the storyline, and as well as what's going on down there in Olympia, and the successes that they had down there. And then, also what Dow Constantine's trying to do and everything else. So we've never stopped. And I think because of us never stopping, we've never had an opportunity to even process what we went through. And so,
it's information overload, just daily. It's sort of like during the Trump years, where every day things is just turning in some weird, strange direction. But happening here, I don't know if weird, strange is really the right word, but things were constantly happening, and they didn't stop. So I would think that, as being a former reporter, you can get burned out, man.
Yeah, I mean, people have to remember that, through it all, even through the CHOP, the Western Barricade, the morning update show continued. You know what I'm saying? Every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. we're on air, even today. And so, like I said, it was a lot of people I know. They're like, yeah, after CHOP, I had to take a break, took a hiatus, took a sabbatical, did this, did that. I mean, the morning update show kept moving and it continues to move. And that's really where it was going before the protest. And then after the protest, the storylines from the protest now moved to the morning update show. And we've also just been, and you got to think on top of that, where the voice that really, is holding a lot of these people accountable. Somebody's like, oh, the mayor's blocking I call the mayor. What's happening? And the mayor says, no, I call Morales. Like, wow, you need to get on our platform. Oh, because that if Constantine is doing this, what's happening, Dow? You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, because like we're reporting on things, but also we're a media voice of accountability for our community, which is we can clearly know the Black community here has been continuously overlooked by city hall and county government and state government for decades, if not longer. And so we have the added responsibility of the accountability and holding people accountable downtown. And so it's layered on. You know what I'm saying? I mean, right. Just showing up and reporting, my friend, that was gone out the window a long time ago.
It's the ultimate in citizen journalism. And I know that actually it's something that we've talked about. And you said that you'd never really done this type of thing before. And you're more of that kind of special project kind of guy, but yet you can't walk away from it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been throughout my career, you know what I'm saying? I've been a beat reporter, you know what I'm saying? Here's what happened. Here's what's going on. Here's what's next or whatever. But, I mean, where we were at right now, and especially what we're doing in Converge, this isn't what we wanted to be doing. I like the morning update show was only supposed to be on air for 2 months. Our president at the time said COVID is going to be gone in 2 months, maybe 3 months. And you know what I'm saying? And we just move on. And now, we're in our 14th, 15th month on the morning update show. And like I said, it isn't something that we ever really wanted to be doing, but it's just what's required right now. My mom was saying that Buddha said, I don't know, it's third party. So I don't know, Buddha might have said it, might not have. But Mama said that Buddha says, what's in your way is your way. And right now, all of this is in my way. I mean, if you were to ask me, what do I want to be doing? I'd rather just be, really focusing on uplifting stories about our community you know, and putting my efforts there. But right now, what's in my way is really being a voice of our community in following up here on what's happening in government and making sure that they're delivering and keeping their word.
I think that Converge became a very important media alternative rather than what was going on with the regular commercial stations locally, because you guys were there in the street every day. And like I said, it was citizen journalism, but also, you got local officials that they were paying attention to you and they would come on to your shows because this stuff was constantly changing. So kudos to you guys for what you did during that time. But I think it was very, very important. Yeah. During this time too, you were talking about how, white people came out in protests, but there was an element of white people out there that were out there just to cause problems. And I think a lot of people in this town still are, they look at what happened in the protests in a very negative way that had a lot to do with those folks that were causing problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is there's a lot of people in Seattle who, let's be honest, time and again, these are people who just go with the headline, man. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean, and that's why. So we got a few different things here. What you're saying, and we're gonna get back to them white people here in a second. But one of the issues that we have here in our city is a very lazy media. And we saw that in the case that, like, during the Seattle protests, Seattle Police Department, we were getting all kinds of comments and messages out of them in the city hall, and people weren't pushing back, and they were putting it up, putting up these headlines and everything, and a lot of it was misinformation, disinformation, or omissions, and there wasn't enough pushback from the media. It wasn't enough hard questions being asked, for the media, and a lot of that as well meant that it's like during the Seattle protests, we were the few people. I'm on tape there and asking Mayor Durkin's answering the question. I'm like, Mayor Durkin, looks like there's a different faction that's out there. These are different people that are out there. What's going on? And because we were trying to explain to our audience, and a lot of people were not explaining, who have media platforms, they were not explaining, like, hey, what's happening here is that an element who's always been in Seattle. These are the Mayday guys. You know what I'm saying? They've always been here. That, man, they are now basically infiltrating a lot of these protest movements that are there for the value of Black lives. And, somebody sitting at home in Queen Anne and Magnolia and Northgate, wherever they might be, South Seattle, without that explanation of what's going on. And now you're showing, oh, wow, somebody went and burned down a Starbucks. It's the Black Lives Matter, whatever. Nah, that's not the case. And the media failed Seattle. You know what I'm saying? The media failed this city in being able, because they was out there. They was chasing interviews. They were trying to get, somebody but Black Blog to be confidential, and talk to them on camera, off camera. So it wasn't like they wasn't out there. They was out there and knew exactly what's going on. But, they purposely, or maybe unintentionally, but I don't know, considering they was out there, weren't very specific in communicating that to the general public. And that's where you see that a lot of the sentiment that was behind these protests, uplifting the value of Black lives, lost a lot of public support because, it was coming across in the media that now the BLM people have turned violent. You know what I'm saying? And that was never the case at all. This is an element that's been in our city going way, way back a long time.
Well, what they really
hijacked the message.
What they really failed at was providing context, which is really the core mission of journalism. Basically, they become the masters of the obvious. Behind me is a crowd, and it doesn't further the discussion. It's purely reactive, which is why you guys were so important out there during the action, so you people could see and have context for what was going on.
Exactly.
So, Omari, as someone that was there every day and continues to cover this, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but it really changed Seattle. And we look at our city council and our local government and the mayor. How do you see what happened to them? It seemed like they just shifted to this kind of left position, defund. and then created a lot of chaos.
Well, yeah, so saying lead, follow, or get out the way. And city hall, most of them just needed to get out the way. This was an opportunity, and it's funny because that's all I used to lead these the streams with. Is like, man, Seattle's just looking for leadership. We just, man, anybody, the floor is yours. You know what I'm saying? Please step up, be a leader. And these people were so driven by Twitter and so driven by whatever that they failed to lead. It was funny one time, right? Somebody was wanting to get a response out of me, or the response they thought they were going to get. And they're like, hey, man, Donald Trump is tweeting about Seattle. He's calling it an anarchist, whatever, district and everything else. What do you think about Donald Trump's tweet? And I said, man, with the most powerful man in the world putting a spotlight on this city, what a fantastic opportunity for a leader to arise right now. I mean, the stage is set. The president of the United States is tweeting about our city. If you was a leader waiting in the wings, now is your time. Seattle's full of cowards, though. Yep. When we needed leadership the most, no one came. How is it that Converge Media, we're media guys and we're out there on the front line de-escalating. We're out there trying to bring things down. We're out there helping people negotiate and this and that. Where's all this money the city is paying the people who do this, de-escalate or deal with people or manage this or rights or whatever? No one showed up. One of the legacies of the Seattle protests is a failure in leadership across all levels. And also, I think the people in Capitol Hill learned a lot too, because there was nobody who was coming out there. I mean, as far as like the established groups and things like that, there was in the mix that like we really saw, meaning that like if this was going down in the Central District, you would have had like the NAACP, the Urban League, or this or that, Mothers for whatever, the elders, the church groups, the pastors, everybody would have, you know what I'm saying? Because it's our neighborhood, it's our people. And that we saw over there, and this isn't, I love the Hill, and I love my people there, and I'm not trying to disparage the Hill at all, but I'm just saying that like there was no community group on Capitol Hill that had a respect of the people in the street, because a lot of those people, people were showing up. It was a destination for some people. A lot of those people lived there. That's why it was a sustained protest. They lived in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? But that's a small thing compared to the absolute cowardice that we witnessed last year. No one was willing to put themselves in harm's way politically. No one was asking people to go out there and get tear gassed, but people wouldn't put themselves in harm's way even politically. But, in to just lead, and that's all people were asking for is leadership for on the city government side and everything else. And, it wasn't until after the fact. It's funny to me because, after the fact, so many people call us up, oh, it's Converge, we'll meet with you. I'd be like, man, that boat done sailed. When we needed you guys there, when the people of this city, the Emerald City, needed leaders, new, old, and different to make themselves known, people did the math in their head and was like, oh, this might go all bad. I don't want to put myself out there. It might look bad when I try to run for this or that. And they
so coming up on some elections here. That's going to play itself out one way or the other. But what do you think the situation is now? Has the pressure been relieved at all, or what are we facing this summer?
Yeah, I mean,
has the situation changed dynamically enough that there may be something different that goes on this summer?
Well, I think that you need to realize that there's different layers of people who are all looking for, a shift in what's going on in Black lives here. And so you have some people who 100% where they're at, they're like, hey, 1 year ago, We didn't have a law that said that police officers have to intervene. 1 year ago, there was no tactics law. 1 year ago, there wasn't decertification. 1 year ago. So around police issues, there's a big group of people who are like, they're taking back and they're taking a bow and they're clapping and they're like, hey, we made something happen in 12 months. You also got a group of people who, they have a larger goal. And I'm not saying in a negative way, and I'm not talking about this group that tears stuff up and burns things down, but they have a different vision of what a success might be or what moving the needle might be. But I think that a lot of those people, when you're talking about the thousands and thousands of people that are out there, I mean, they're able to look within the systems that they operate in. You got to remember, these are people, white people who work around here and used to these systems and everything. They're like, hey, man, in 12 months, we're out here in the streets. We got these laws passed, everything. So on a state level, the city is still murky. And so in that sense, I think there's a lot of people who would look and be like, we're getting, our efforts have paid off. And so there might not necessarily be, in the streets or this pressure like you're talking about and everything else. But I want to make something very clear, though, here, Enrique. And this is where, Seattle hits the mark and then these people have awoken and they gotten out in the streets. But let's be very clear. If there was no police problem in Seattle, and if police relationships between the SPD and the Black community were at an all-time high, and it was whatever, right? You have to remember the household income gap. The average Black family makes $42,500 a year. The average white household, $105,000 a year. Has nothing to do with policing. Home ownership has been in constant decline here for decades amongst Black people in Seattle, King County. Home ownership, that's the key to generational wealth, has nothing to do with policing. The education gap between Black and white students, at one point, one of the largest in the nation, has nothing to do with policing. So everybody has showed up, and I'm glad that they did. They made their voices heard and everything else. But imagine if tens of thousands of people were like, this income gap here is unacceptable. If tens of thousands of people were sitting there at the school board, the school district, being like, man, we have to fix this gap. If tens of thousands of people were like, man, gentrification is not okay. So, so Seattle and people would be like, man, this is a victory. Yeah, this is fine on one thing. But even if there was never a police problem, the things that have been impacting Black people the most in Seattle, King County, and the state of Washington still remain. Where are the people? Where are the voices? Who's getting in the streets? What politician? And speaking of elections, the Democrat Party here has failed Black people on their watch. All of these things that we continue to see, these statistics that are horrible, that's under a Democratic watch in this city. And majority over a Democratic watch down in the state house and in the county. So do I have any faith? And I'm not saying that the other party would do any better, but just because these jokers are getting elected downtown, somebody's continuously getting elected down there, promising Black people something, appropriate our pain to make them look more in touch, get into office, but everybody's continuously overseeing the downturn in the Black community. And that's the bigger picture. We can't tie everything up into police killings and police issues and everything else, even though it's important. Black people's sustainability in this city are tied to even bigger issues.
Yeah, I know. Well, there are no Black people on the council.
And you've got the issue.
And that's why they acted that way, too. I promise you.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You brought up a lack of leadership. Then what kind of leadership do you think there should have been? What would have had looked like? What would it look like?
Man, I think that Seattle, the elected officials are so scared of Twitter. First of all, elected officials who can just throw their phone away and not be worried about that, because, wrong is wrong, right is right. And, these guys could probably go back and be like, oh, my office released a press release that did this or whatever. It's not impactful. That means it's meaning nothing. You know what I'm saying? I think that, so for example, and I know there's a few council members impacted, COVID stuff, anything else, but maybe send somebody else from your office or whatever. The times it got funky on the Western Barricade, for example, that might have been like 3-4 hours out of a day, sometimes, more. But like during the day, the protesters were out there. People were chilling. I didn't see nobody. There was a few politicians. The one person who was out there, King County Council member Gurmai Zahalai.
Mhm.
And then one night there on the barricade, after me pleading, I'm in the stream. I'm like, man, I don't care if you were elected dog catcher. Someone needs to bear witness. And that's the night. And it's unfortunate that this other guy with his Soul of Seattle or whatever, he took that picture, and that picture was the people, me echoing the people's voices that they wanted to see electeds out there to bear witness with what was happening. And so those electeds who came out there that night were coming out there directly at the pleas of the people. And now these other guys take a picture of that and be like, oh, see, they just showed up to take a step, which was totally disingenuous, but whatever, Seattle media. But these people who were elected in the office, and especially we got 2 citywide positions as well, let alone that's Sawant's office, let alone that this is just people were there from all districts. Somebody could, shown up. Somebody could have sent people from their office. Hey, I'm so representative so-and-so's office. What's going on out here? How can it be whatever? I'm not saying somebody need to show up and get tear gassed. But man, just make it known, be present, communicate what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Really press the SPD, but also press, the people in the streets. How can we, whatever, be present? And sometimes you don't have to know all the answers, but when people know that you're present, it means so much more. That's why it's like credibility is at an all-time low with all of these guys. You know what I'm saying? And for reasons best known to them, and some people, when it was the middle of the pandemic, and I'm not being, not cognizant of that and everything else. But all I'm saying is when it took a time for leadership directly or leadership innovatively, it wasn't there, man.
So what's ahead now for Converge? You guys have been at this for a while. You've developed a pretty strong reputation about, kind of covering what's happening in the street, in the community, bringing us some pretty straightforward coverage of things. What do you want to do going forward here, based on the vision that you had in the beginning?
I mean, a lot of people who watch the morning update show probably won't be happy with it. But then I want to just go back to my life before the morning update show, which was really like, putting my time and energy into these young producers and directors and man, telling positive, uplifting stories around our community. Tying it, like I said, all the way back now to 12 months. Since the murder of George Floyd, our morning update show was such an amazing show because it was really based upon a news show based upon positive and uplifting stories around Black people. And, getting into the news and all this other kinds of stuff has taken a lot of my time and energy and Converge's time and energy. And we're not able to tell these amazing stories about our people and culture across the Northwest that we really want to do. That's what I would want to do, is shift back to that. People would probably see much less of me as I focus on giving my energy to all these amazing young people here. But in the short term, we're just going to continue with our morning update show and our other programming here. And, we want to hold people accountable, but now they talking about Councilman Morales is talking about the 30 million might not come out for another year and a half or so. Hey, man, I can't hold on that long. I told people I was still holding on to the land till the money comes out. But, we just want to continue right now. You know what I'm saying? God's plan. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be in this position. I'm uncomfortable on video and on TV and things like that. But, I say God has put me here for a purpose. And in that being the case, I want to give my very best effort for as long as I can while I'm here to serve the purpose and, to serve our community.
Well, I'm so thankful you're here. So how can people support what you do? Because nonprofit media is just, it's a slog. How can people support what you do every day?
Look, I got a better word for you. No profit media. We're in one of these weird positions too, because, we started as a for-profit company. You know what I'm saying? We were thinking about all this other stuff and that, we just, so anyways, that being said, it isn't like, people like, oh, you got donations from here and grants from there. And it's like, what I'm saying, we're really just mom and pop. This is the American dream right here, entrepreneurship at its finest. And I appreciate you asking. People can go to whereweconverge.com/donate. And man, I'll be honest with you, we really survive off of like these $5 donations. Big shout out to our $5 family. That being said, you're more than welcome to give us as much as you like. But I mean, it's real. When I say they keep us on air, they keep us on air. Like everything that we get here goes right back into it. I'm surprised. I mean, that'll tell you the commitment of the people here at Converge. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're barely making it. I like to tell people though that we're the little engine that could, and you know what I'm saying, we're gonna keep on going with people's support.
All right, Omari Salisbury, we'll keep on keeping on. We really appreciate what you have done and will continue to do, and hang in there. I know it's been a tough road this past year, but I think you and Converge you've played such an important role in the democracy of this city and this country. I really do. So keep on.
Thank you so much.
Man, thank you guys, man. I appreciate this invite. I feel like I'm moving on up in the world, man. Because I'm here with the big dogs, right? It used to just be the neighborhood guys, like, hey, Big O, I got podcasts. Can you come on? Now I'm sitting here with the big dogs, so we're moving on up.
We're the old dogs, but you can join us. You can join us anytime. All right, Omari Salisbury, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys. I gotta hop. Appreciate you.
Okay.